Hello, people. It says I am live, so I'm going to assume that I am live, and everybody, well, I say everybody, and the 0 people who are in my live stream right now can see and hear me just fine. Internet looks half decent today, and that's because I happen to be home alone, which is fantastic. But yeah, greetings all. I thought I'd do a live stream just to talk about a few things and a few headlines that I want to tackle. Obviously, the main headline being Professor Jiang has released some more material, and I thought it'd be interesting just to cover what I've seen. He's been doing the rounds quite heavily. I'm not going to cover everything that he's done. I just want to kind of cover something that I hadn't covered before, which was his full interview with Mehdi Hasan, because essentially he's come out the other side of that interview looking quite good. I think it actually had a positive effect on his reputation, being that Mehdi Hasan was so I wouldn't say hostile. I would say slightly unforgiving, but also perhaps not as. I think he was relatively fair, actually. If I'm going to be totally honest with you, I think Mehdi Hasan was relatively fair, but because Professor Jiang, or Jiang, I should say, I'm not gonna call him Jiang because that just sounds incomplete. And even though I know he's not a professor, I'm probably just gonna continue calling him Professor Jiang just for the sake of simplicity. He wears it as a moniker. We know it's not legitimate, but I also can't be bothered for all of that. I'm not going to learn how to pronounce his first name for the sake of not calling him professor. So let's just say Professor Jiang knew how to field the questions with an air of grace, and didn't allow it to rattle or unsettle him. So that worked quite well in his favor. So I wanted to cover the latest video he's done with interviews done with Sneeko, because that was quite interesting. Then perhaps cover the Mehdi Hasan video, and then just cover a series of different topics that I want to tackle. I also, on my other channel, The King's Monologue, released a music video as well for my track that's been released for a few months now, Save the World. So I'm just going to kind of like... So I've got this music video, which is me being a little bit creative. So feel free to check that out. I'm not going to play the whole video now. That if that interests you, and you can stream it obviously on all streaming platforms. Save the World, KXNG Mono. So that's there for you guys. I'm going to close that down now, and I want to get started. Let's get started. Let's dive in to some Professor Jiang. Shout out Sibonakele in the chat. How you doing? And shout out everybody who's on the stream now. I think we are teetering on the brink of 10, which is good, considering this is one of my now signature impromptu unscheduled lives, which is just the way I seem to like to do it. I don't like scheduling. Well, I wouldn't say I don't like. I just don't really schedule my lives. I just kind of go, okay, let's go. Whoever turns up, and whoever missed it can watch it on the rebound, I guess. Okay, so let's dive in. Professor Jiang tells Sneeko why Donald Trump faces little consequences to all of his actions. It's a relatively short video. Feel free, let me know. And I know he's not a professor. I tackled that probably just a few minutes before you came in the monitor. Yes, I already tackled that. I know he's not a professor. I'm going to call him Professor Jiang because I can't bother to learn his first name, and I can't be bothered to, and I don't think I want to call him Jiang by itself because that just sounds a bit disrespectful. So I'm just going to call him Professor Jiang. It's just easier. We know it's a moniker. We know it's not a real name. But anyway, let's dive in.
The criticism they have for somebody like Mamdani, for example, I live in New York City. They are criticizing him for the way he eats. If he's eating during an interview, or if he's picking up food with his hand the same way people eat pizza. But the stuff that Trump gets away with, if I'm imagining Kamala Harris, for example,
Okay, so this is just jumped in at a really weird place. I haven't pre-watched this. And I do think Mamdani, I don't know like an awful lot about American politics, but I do know that Mamdani, I feel like he trolls a bit with the whole hand eating thing. I think he does it up a little bit because he has been caught eating rice with his hands. Now, I'm not gonna say it's not done, but for instance, it's not like all communities eat rice with their hands if you go rural enough. Yeah. So anywhere where rice is kind of like native Asia, Africa, okay, all communities eat rice with their hands if you go deep enough, if you go rural enough. But most people who grow up in the West don't eat rice with their hands. It's just not what we do. There are things we do eat with our hands. West Africans, we eat all swallows with our hands. Indians have plenty of foods they eat with their hands. But rice, for both groups, is normally a freshie visiting. you know what I mean when I say a freshie, someone who's just coming over, who you might see eating rice with their hands. But it's not really a done thing in the West. So I feel like when Mamdani does this, he does it to troll. He knows what the response is going to be. And it gives him an opportunity to attack the racism of the right. But I do think they're not aware. I think he's trolling. Mamdani probably doesn't normally eat things like rice with his hands. I just thought I'd throw that in as a little side note, because it's not really done in the West, you know. Us migrants, we're soft belly Asians and Africans. We're not the real deal, you know.
Launched the ground troop invasion, or was tweeting the things that Trump is tweeting, there would be mass outrage. I'm wondering what the key factor is. What is that? Is it a race thing? What makes people let Trump get away with what he's getting away with? What's the most important aspect of his rhetoric or the way he presents himself?
Well, first of all, before Jiang jumps in here, of course it's a race thing. In America, everyone knows that the white male in America and the West, the white male has to be a heinous monster before anyone even criticizes them. Look at the things that Trump is doing. Trump is a criminal, like he's on a par with AH, you know. He's a monster, like a literal kind of like devil. The entire global community should be seeking to throw this man in a prison cell. What does white America do? Oh, Trump, oh, we don't agree with you. Oh, Trump, oh, please stop, Trump. This is typical what you get from the West. Yeah, it's typical what you get from you. They love to turn around, they love to point a finger and tell every Asian, Middle Eastern, African leader how evil they are, how despotic they are, point. But then their leaders go in and commit genocides in front of everybody for no reason, for no reason whatsoever. It's not even like, you can't even put it behind, you can't even use the excuse of, you know, religious fanaticism or, you know, the threat of invasion. None of these things. Just like, we're gonna just X 1 million Iraqis because we want some cheaper oil from the region and we want a more agreeable regime, you know, regime change. So they do the most heinous things in broad daylight and they're never condemned. And the problem is, even the people who are supposed to be against them, you know, this alleged left-right dichotomy that takes place, oh, the Democrats, oh, the Republicans, oh, the Conservatives, oh, Labour, all this, that, they don't really do anything. They don't really care. Because deep down, they know it's for the benefit, the long-term benefit of the West's position in global economics, global military, global power. They know it benefits them long-term. That's why why is there no Million Man March? Where's the white Million Man March, respectfully speaking? Okay, black people saw an injustice being done and they get together, and 1 million of them get together and they march. You know, you have the Occupy Wall Street, you know, people seeing things that are wrong, they get together and they really, we're going to get rid of you, you know, or we're going to see this situation changed. Respectfully, Middle America, white England, they don't care. They don't care when their leaders go out and commit genocides. They don't care. They can get all passionate about free Palestine, but when their actual president is doing exactly the same thing, or their prime minister is doing exactly the same thing, suddenly they become wallflowers. We don't know the ins and outs. He didn't need to go. He was a bit of a monster. He was pretty bad. Half of these people didn't even know who the Ayatollah of Iran was. Yeah, they couldn't mention his name. But as soon as their prime minister, their president, their government decide to topple them, he needed to go. Gaddafi was a monster. Khomeini was a monster. He needed to go. He was such a monster. You weren't saying that before. You didn't know his name because you're a monster and you support your monsters. These people always support their monsters. You must understand that.
I think it's just the fact that he's so unpredictable. The fact that like every single day he's changing his mind. Like there was a press conference where like every sentence was a contradiction, right? He's like, we won the war. Oh, we lost. We're not winning the war, but we'll win it. Oh, we can't win the war. He just kept on going on and on and on. And so when you become like that, when you are unpredictable, people were able to project their fantasies onto you, right? So for the MAGA people, Donald Trump is playing a 5D chess game, which is like his real goal is not to win the war in Iran. His real goal is to destroy the deep state with this war. Donald Trump, if he is to, basically free America of transnational capital, if he's to liberate America from the deep state, who've been in power since the 1963 assassination of JFK, he needs this war to basically consolidate power, right? This war.
Now, this is crazy because I'm not saying it's incorrect. I don't have that much of an opinion on this, but I'd imagine that this message is going to be very, very popular amongst the alt-right and the remaining MAGA Republicans, because essentially it's making Donald Trump's lunatic behavior sound planned. That's what he's saying. He's essentially saying, he's what he's doing is he's bringing the entire military industrial complex into disrepute by doing this hugely unpopular war, and that way he's going to be able to crumble the deep state with what end? To put the power back in the hands of the true Americans? Is he outfoxing the who's who control him currently? It would be great if he was, if he turned around in 3 years and he was like, I'm sorry I had to act like a crazy guys, but I had to play this part, to play this move, but now we're free from the who's. America's running itself. Bring all those migrants back from Mexico. I don't know. I don't see it happening, but it's an interesting hypothesis.
Or the deep state wants this war because they want to maintain the American empire, but Donald Trump wants to use this war to become a monarch, which is necessary in order for America to return to its democratic roots. So for them, it's this 5D chess.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy. So Donald Trump wants to become, I think he used the word a monarch. So he wants to essentially immortalize himself in American politics. It's funny they'd use a different word for that if it was in Africa. But anyway, let's say he wants to become a monarch, okay, and that's essential for America to return to its democratic state. So Donald Trump is doing this to bring America back to democracy, according to Professor Jiang here. It's very, very interesting. It's funny because before I watched this, I did have the craziest thought. And let me know if you guys have thought something similar. I did have the craziest thought. My thought was this. What if, when all that stuff went down after Donald Trump's first term and they tried to impeach him, we can all agree, by the way, obviously, I'm not going to say we can all agree. I'm going to say that I personally think that particularly in the run up to and during his first term, Donald Trump was absolutely unfairly treated. And I know that will sound crazy now because he's such a lunatic and we all hate him. But I absolutely think that there was a lot of projecting onto him. A lot of like people were, oh, he's racist, this, that. It's like, oh, I was sitting there and I was like, you're all that. What are you talking about? You guys are much worse than him. Every Democrat and Republican president that preceded him was horrendous. And they were trying to act like he was this outlier in terms of the way that and I don't think any of that was true. So I'm just giving my honest opinion now. I know a lot of people will hate on this, but I don't care. So I think he was incredibly unfairly treated. But then obviously since then, and since his kind of like, I'm going to say failed impeachment, but I don't think it was failed. I think they just, basically the impeachment was never going to go through. It was a warning shot to him to basically say, you're going to play ball or you're going to disappear. That's basically what happened. There's a few people right now who are very far right who weren't to begin with, and they've all had that warning shot fired at them. Okay, so I'm going to be honest with you. I think Russell Brand is another one that's happened to, and I also think Joe Rogan, it might have happened to as well. But I'm going to leave Joe Rogan out because he's always been a bit of an idiot. But Russell Brand his politics have completely changed now, where he's now sitting on the right, and he wasn't like that at all. Okay, so something bizarre has happened where, and it's obvious to see that he's being, at least from my perspective, blackmailed by the you-know-who's, by a certain cabal of people. Okay, so Donald Trump, anyway, for at least the last, 7-8 years, has absolutely been under the thumb of the you-know-who's, and now we're seeing the fruits of that. Okay, so we're now seeing the fruits of the fact that he's entirely controlled. Okay, and what's interesting is that him being under, well, I'm going to say under this control, but the new person that has emerged, this kind of like far more extreme person, is clearly unhinged. No one can predict what he's going to do next. And I had this funny thought. I thought to myself, what if he's gone to ChatGPT? Hear me out. What if he's gone to ChatGPT and he's been like, yo, look, this is my situation, I need you to write me like a script of things that I need to do to defeat this enemy, And it's like the most unhinged list of things, but they eventually lead to him being able to kind of like be free, if that makes sense, or to kind of like be himself or whatever it is. I thought it was such a funny thought in my head. I was like, what if, because not right now, there's only two possibilities. Possibility one is that the dude's totally insane, and that's the biggest possibility, which is 99% likely. Or possibility number two, which is what Professor Jiang is suggesting here. Possibility number two is that this is all part of a master plan. Every single unhinged tirade, every single crazy move he does is part of a bigger plan to to have some kind of an outcome. And it's mad I'm thinking this way, or anyone would think this way, because his behavior is so unhinged. You end up just like thinking crazy things like that, because you're like, who's this mad? Who on earth behaves this crazy? Now, don't get it twisted, it's 99%, 99.999% not true. I'm just throwing it out there as a crazy conspiratorial thought that I had that was quite entertaining for us, so I thought I'd share it.
And he is flirting with the idea of running for a third term. JD Vance, they're trying to separate it. Okay, so he's going to, can you explain how is that going to work? Is it because it's wartime?
Look, I think Donald Trump has been very clear about this. He is going to get a third term. And the reason why is that if he ever steps out of office, the Democrats come to power, the first and only thing that Democrats are going to do is persecute this guy to death, okay? I mean, think about what happened to him, like when he left office in 2020, right? There was an FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago because he had some classified documents that everyone in Washington has, right? So everything in Washington, D.C. is classified. And like they didn't prosecute Hillary Clinton for having a private email server, which is against, law. They didn't prosecute Joe Biden for having classified documents in his garage in Delaware. So clearly this was a political persecution, right? So you had that FBI raid in Mar-a-Lago. Yeah,
and I do agree with Professor Jiang here. I do think it was persecution. Now, some people have already replied to me and said, yeah, he's always been. I'm not denying that he's always been, racist or this, that, and the other. I'm not, by the way, sitting here saying he was a good person. Sometimes people hear that, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that so is provably every other president before him. Yeah. Biden passed some unbelievably racist laws, as did Hillary Clinton, as did Kamala Harris, as did all of them. All of these people are heinous, wicked devils, but no one's ever used that accusation against them. So what did he do that was so unique? And I'm not saying now, because we all know now what he's done. I'm saying back then. Yeah, back then, what did he do that was so unique for the whole media to be so emboldened to be against this guy and be like, oh, he's racist. And I'll be honest with you, I'm the type of person it really pisses me off when channels like BBC, CNN, the most racist channels in the friggin' world, turn around and start accusing other people of being racist. And these are channels and media outlets that just dog whistle racism from friggin' dusk till dawn. They're just doing the most wicked and stereotypical or promoting the most stereotypical things, and then they want to turn around and then decide who we are and are not allowed to call racist. Like, respectfully, piss off. Yeah. Piss off BBC, piss off Sky News. You don't get to determine when I do or don't call someone racist, because I think Keir Starmer is a piece of shit. Yeah, I think Keir Starmer is one of the most racist prime ministers we've had for a long time. Little Mr. You know who supporter will always come out and accuse other people of being that. So respectfully, I ain't trying to hear that. I don't play their ball. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, I will decide who I think is, but against me or against my, my best interests. Yeah, I don't need you, the media, the shitty media, to determine for me who is and isn't racist. So that's where a lot of my irritation comes from there.
Lawfare, where 6 attorney generals or trying to prosecute Donald Trump. You had these lawsuits that were trying to bankrupt Donald Trump. So like, if Donald Trump were ever to leave office, the Democrats would just make his life a living hell. They would not just go after him, but they would go after his immediate family, right? Because remember, Don Jr. is involved in a lot of cryptocurrency shenanigans. There's been a lot of insider trading in the Trump White House this past year, and it's all very blatant. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this is all in insider trading.
Yeah, there's been a shed load of that going on in this. And once again, not being too political, I'm just more looking at this more from a analytical perspective, analyzing Mr. Jiang here and Sneeko. So I don't want to get too deep into the politics of it all, but the amount of like insider trading, scams, let's just be honest, the amount of scams that the administration have undertaken is wild. I've never seen this before. They're just selling their own, they got Trump Bibles. They're just selling, scamming people. They had a Trump phone. They had Trump coin, freaking cryptocurrency coin, Trump NFT. It's crazy. It's crazy. Like, this is stuff where I think they're piling up all of these things against his, so they can always throw him in prison, because there's no way anyone with an iota of common sense would be looking to scam the general public and go for a quick pay. Like, Trump's a lifelong billionaire. Do you understand? Like, I don't think people really understand that he's a lifelong billionaire. There's no benefit to him, releasing shit coins and selling Bibles to the middle belt of America. There's no benefit to this. This is all to, I guess, stack up the charges against him to keep him playing ball, because it's unless he's like severely mentally deranged, there's no way he'd agree to push those kinds of projects. none of that makes any sense. These are kind of things that, you know, the SEC are absolutely can prosecute for quite easily. So this is why I think there's definitely something going on there.
So there are a lot of court cases that they can file against Donald Trump. And Donald Trump understands this. He understands. Look. I'm doing all this. I know that if I leave office, I'll be prosecuted by the Democrats. So I won't leave office. It's that simple. Okay. And a lot of pieces are already in place for his third term. So, for example, he's turning ICE into his basically private secret police, his private police force, and he's expanding their powers. He's talked about deploying National Guard throughout the country. He might use this war to suspend the Constitution. There might be a false flag attack. In 2028, he could technically run as a vice president and have his son, Don Jr., as the presidential nominee. Believe it or not, but there's nothing in the Constitution that prevents you from doing this. It's immoral, but it's not illegal. Also, if the Democrats were to challenge this,
see, I wasn't sure. I thought it was not a case of it being illegal or immoral. I just thought it was impossible to do, if that makes sense, because it's against the Constitution. Like, you can't, correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, I'm not American, but I thought you just can't run for a third term. It's just like, you know, this it's literally blocked by, you know, bureaucracy, so to speak. You know, it's something that you're not enabled to do. Now, I understand that the argument is that he wants to change the Constitution so he's able to run for a third term, which I guess would lean into his point about it being immoral. But it's interesting, you know. Yeah, and I mean, I want to know that. I mean, he's talking to Sneeko, and this is a part of the Professor Jiang spiel, and one of the reasons why people find him, you can always tell by the audience that people seek what their message is, and by the audience people see, you can always tell what their message is and what their, you know, what level they're pitching at, so to speak. Okay. And he is someone who, I guess, likes the influencer space, and I'm not going to say there's anything particularly wrong with that, but I don't think he particularly would have enjoyed his interview with Mehdi Hasan, for instance, which was the political space. It's funny that he doesn't engage at all in the educational space, in the academic space. So I think the thing about Professor Jiang, and I know he's not a professor, by the way, but the thing about Professor Jiang is that you won't ever find him in the academic space. I don't think I've seen a video, but if someone wants to point one to me, that would be good. But I'd be interested to see if he actually puts himself in a situation of debate or even discourse with an actual credentialed professor or academic. He's pitching here. The people here understand his message. They find it digestible, and they find him easy to understand. And he finds it very easy to, I guess, present his ideas. You know, they're not formulated into something that's, I guess, academically defensible and robust, which is why this audience suits his message. That's kind of why I feel is the reason he's with Sneeko at the moment.
It would go to the Supreme Court, and Donald Trump appointed 3 justices to the Supreme Court, and he'll probably appoint 2 more over the next 2 years. So he'll have like a solid majority. So again, I don't know the specifics of what they have in mind. I think he could run for a 3rd term as the vice president, and I think that's the most likely option. But he could also, as this war gets worse and worse, he could also suspend the Constitution, like Zelensky did in Ukraine, right? So I'm pretty confident he will get his 3rd term, though.
It's not just,
you know what, that's interesting take there. The idea of using the backdrop of America being embroiled in an actual war, because I guess everyone, including myself, has been framing this, and the perspective is that America is embroiled in an optional invasion. Okay, this is something they didn't need to do, similar to what they did in Venezuela. They're just invading. It's optional. They can do what they like. They're the superpower. No one can really stop them. But I think the fact that the war is kind of like cascading in the wrong direction towards something that America is increasingly looking like they're not in control of, that could be by design, because it's within that backdrop of, you know, we're at war, as opposed to we're involved in a regime change, or we're destabilizing a nation, or we're going there to, you know, to set up and to defend a democracy. To say we're at war, there's no backing out here, we're involved in a war, that gives you the powers. It increases the powers of the commander in chief, being the president. It increases their power, increases their accessibility, increases their ability to say, okay, we're gonna maybe do a draft, and we're gonna, yeah, like you said, suspend the constitution. We're gonna, you know what I mean, we're gonna suspend you know, Senate. We're gonna, you know, there's bigger fish to fry right now, and it's under the smoke of that backdrop, which he himself has crafted, that he's able to get away with murder, essentially. So that's an interesting take. I concur on that.
Insider trading, they're doing these prediction markets, and he's giving pardons to people who are clearly paying him. It's so obvious, and nobody speaks about it. You can see the market right before he gives a speech about when he's going to attack Iran again because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. So clearly there's people on the inside that are making trades, especially in the oil market, but they get away with this organized crime more than I've ever seen anybody get away with this stuff. And
sorry, but I'm saying he gets away with it because he's doing the bidding of the elite, right? The elite wants this war in Iran, and Trump is doing that. As long as Trump keeps this war going, then the elite will allow him to get away with anything. But once you know, he's out of office, then he'll be destroyed.
Was that it? Okay, so that was it. That was that video. That was interesting. So that's some new Professor Jiang. I feel like a DJ. New Ghostface. No. So that's some new Professor Jiang that just newish, just a few days old now. That dropped 4 days ago. But it's since his interview with Mehdi Hasan, which I've got here, and I feel like for those of you who haven't seen it, this is kind of like the talk of the town a few days ago, because this was, I guess, Professor Jiang's first time he'd been in front of a journalist who was there to perhaps not just placate him, but to actually grill him and to check him and to ask further questions when he makes, you know, statements that are maybe questionable or questionably supported. But I watched it back and he didn't come out too bad. I think when they initially showed the highlights of this interview, it looked like Professor Jiang got completely grilled. But watching it in full, he actually does, I think he does a decent job of not looking too bad. It's not flawless by any means, and he certainly still, I think the critique laid by Mehdi Hasan stands. A lot of people are like, oh, he didn't prove anything. I was like, no, the critique that he made does stand, and the fact that we're all having conversations about the fact that he's not a professor, even though people knew that before, I think Mehdi has certainly blown that up and made it public knowledge. So let's have a little look-see at this one. Probably won't watch the whole thing, but let's have a little look-see at this interview that Mehdi Hasan did with Professor Jiang.
Some have called you China's Nostradamus. You had 3 famous predictions in 2024: that Trump would get elected, that he would start a war with Iran, and that he would lose a war with Iran.
Iran clearly has the strategic advantage. I think the next step in the escalation ladder is that Trump will send in ground forces.
Nikki Haley was key to your prediction about Iran. You said Trump would pick her as his running mate, but he didn't pick her.
I think that the problem with education is that it focuses too much on facts, too much on rigor, and not enough on imagination.
Too much on facts. Do you hear yourself? Just trying to control what you say now. Your critics might say they're using you as a propagandist.
It is possible I'm a useful idiot. And I suspect that there are many entities around the world who would like to amplify my message, including the Chinese government.
Hold on. You don't call yourself Professor Jiang on your YouTube channel?
I do now, but when I first started out, if you go way back to my early lectures,
when you first...
Just check out the low-key shade as well. I didn't see that. Professor is in inverted commas in the title. So this is Zeteo, which is Mehdi Hasan's channel. And it says Mehdi Hasan versus Professor Jiang. Yeah, that's some low-key shade there. Well, let's go.
Started out, you do call yourself Professor Jiang and you're not a professor. What is your big prediction now for 2026? We'll see what happens. We can test it out at the end of the year. Back in 2024, Chinese-Canadian educator Shui-Qin Jiang posted a video on his YouTube channel, Predictive History, where he laid out three...
So his name's Shui-Qin. Yeah, I'm not... Shui-Qin. No, I'm not going to start calling him now. He's going to remain Professor Jiang. And I know he's not one, but it's just easier.
Big predictions. Donald Trump would win the 2024 election. The US would then go to war with Iran. And ultimately, the US would lose that war. Since then, the self-styled professor who says he uses game theory to analyze the past and predict future geopolitical events has become an internet sensation and has even been dubbed China's Nostradamus. But he's also faced some criticisms over his predictions and many would say pretty out there conspiracy theories. 2 out of 3 of Jiang's big predictions have come true. But how much of that is his own geopolitical foresight and how much of it simply comes down to luck? How much does the Chinese government control or even influence what he says, what he predicts? I decided to not just speak to Shui-Qin Jiang, aka Professor Jiang, about Iran and the state of the world, but also to challenge him a bit. Here's our interview. Shui-Qin Jiang, thank you so much for joining me on Zeteo. You have said you use game theory to predict future geopolitical events. For those who have never heard of game theory, please do explain what it is and how it helps you explain what's happening with Donald Trump and with Iran in particular.
Right. So game theory applied to geopolitics.
So I think Mehdi are even asking that initial question as a little bit of a trip up, because if Mehdi's anything like me, when I first heard him say that he uses game theory, I kind of thought this is a loose interpretation of game theory, at least from what I know about game theory being something that's a little bit more. There's a little bit more of an application of mathematics. So yes, the overriding idea is that, you know, you essentially look at the different entities within a situation as players within the game, but then there is the mathematical aspect where essentially the moves that are being made should be calculable based on a framework or a structure that you place around that game, where he just kind of uses it much more kind of loose and literal, where he's just kind of like, oh, you know, well, I'm just kind of like, imagine that everyone's in the game and imagine this is the play that I'd make if I was in that position. So I kind of feel like Mehdi might be asking him this to trip him up, but that's just my interpretation.
Politics means that we see each individual nation state as a player in a zero-sum game to maximize its individual interests. And so each player would have its own characteristics, its own strengths, and it would adopt a optimal strategy in order to win the zero-sum game.
So how does that apply in the Middle East right now?
Right. So United States is attacking Iran, and these two nation states have different strengths and weaknesses. So America has the world's greatest military. It has aerial supremacy. It has tremendous technology. It has unlimited funding. And so Iran is adopting an asymmetrical strategy of holding the global economy hostage, meaning that rather than attacking the United States directly, which you cannot defeat directly, it is instead controlling the Strait of Hormuz, which is strangling the global economy. And it's attacking the GCC nations, the infrastructure of the GCC nations, in order to force Trump into the negotiating table. So that is the asymmetrical warfare of Iran.
You've also predicted that the US, you had 3 famous predictions in 2024, that Trump would get elected, that he would start a war with Iran, and that he would lose a war with Iran. Based on what you've seen over the past month.
So, I mean, I expanded on the 3 predictions that Professor Jiang made before and just said that No, I mean, it's great that he made them, and it's given him this this degree of celebrity, and everyone's like, oh, he makes predictions. But the third one is still pending, because the third one is that America would lose the war. I think we're all hoping that that one comes true, by the way, obviously. The second one was that America would start the war with Iran, which, once again, it was a good prediction since it hadn't happened. I think that it was like, my ratio I gave it was about 30. There was a 30% chance that if you asked anyone, I think yeah, 1 in 3 people would have said America's going to start a war with Iran, and I think the other remaining would say no, there's not going to be a war with Iran. So I gave him 30% on that. And then Trump winning the election, that was straight up 50-50. Before, that was just straight up when he made the prediction. It wasn't like it was like a long shot, like, oh, Trump, where did you get that name from? It's kind of like, no, that was a 50-50 thing, Trump Republican versus, so I don't think it was that big a deal. I don't think so. Everyone's kind of like making this massive deal about the predictions, and I just think that they were, I think a lot of commentators could have made that runoff predictions, and once again, I feel like maybe Mehdi has picked up a little bit on that. And this isn't me hating, by the way. As you can see, I haven't got a problem with Professor Jiang. Just contextualizing what he's actually achieved in terms of prediction making.
Do you still stand by that prediction?
Yes, I do. I think that after a month, I think that Iran clearly has the strategic advantage. What I mean by that is that Iran is very clearly able to articulate its military objectives, and it has a very clear strategy of how to obtain these military objectives, and it is working very hard and very meticulously to obtain these objectives. This is the complete opposite of America, where Trump has failed to articulate an end goal, and right now it seems that the Trump administration is unable to articulate both a strategy and a purpose to the American public, which is causing most Americans to not support this war. It's also causing low soldier morale among the American forces.
What do you think happens next if/when Iran wins?
Right. So even though Iran has the advantage right now, we still have to remember that America is the world's greatest empire. It has a lot of resources. It has a lot of firepower still not used. So I think the next step in the escalation ladder is that Trump will send in ground forces. So over 5,000 Marines and soldiers have been dispatched to the Middle East. This is already on top of the 50,000 American soldiers already stationed in the Middle East. And most military analysts expect that the Americans will launch an amphibious assault in order to control the Strait of Hormuz. Now, there are several options available to the Americans in order to control the Strait of Hormuz. The first option is to control Karg Island, which is the oil depot of the Iranians. 90% of Iranians' oil exports depart from Karg Island. Then you have Qasim Island, which is just opposite the Strait of Hormuz. And then there's a naval base further down the coastline. And so these are the 3 options that the Americans have. And it is unclear which option the Americans will ultimately choose. But given the track record of the Marines, we can expect the Marines to have an early success. The problem with the strategy and the problem with America's overall strategy is what happens next? How do you maintain control?
I always find it, I'm not going to say bizarre, but slightly amusing when outside analysts, essentially just like, this is probably the perfect time to use the phrase keyboard warrior. And let me land, yeah? Let me land. The reason I say that is because we're sitting here and trying to, conquer military strategies. America's either got to do A, B, or C. It's kind of like if people could sit down and predict exactly what America's next military move was going to be in terms of securing the Strait of Hormuz, then probably wouldn't be a very good strategy. Okay, if everyone knows exactly how it works. And I guess this is the, I'm not going to say the danger, but this is maybe the area of pressure that Professor Jiang might be feeling now, because once you get into that area where you're known for making predictions, then people are always expecting more predictions. And now you find, and each time you're making a prediction, now you find yourself into more and more unfamiliar territory where people have the ability to say, oh, well, you were wrong about this, and tear you down. I was kind of like, it's nothing to do with me, but I'd say that it's difficult to sit down and start making predictions about, you know, you're trying to second guess, or at least, you know, you're trying to literally, you know, figure out and predict what trained military, you know, commanders, officers are going to be, how they're going to be strategizing a war. That's not a thing that a layman can do, even an educated man. You know, none of us are Napoleon here. So this is where I'm like, cool, if you think you can predict that, man, that's thumbs up. A lot of people think that, you know, like I said, keyboard, this is like, you know, 101 keyboard warriorship, isn't it? Saying, oh, that's, I don't think you need to go that deep personally in terms of exactly what they're going to do strategically next. I think broader predictions are safer, and they also are more realistic. Make a broader prediction based on game theory, but making a prediction exactly about how, you know, no one predicted, you know, the Little Hat Nation, you know, completely obliterating Lebanon a couple, you know, was it yesterday or a couple of days ago now, just out of the blue during the ceasefire. No one predicted that they were just going to do that, but that's how it works. You don't predict this kind of stuff. This is crazy stuff. Do you understand what I mean? Well, these people are, by the way, just on top of that, these people are nuts. Yeah, we have to put that into context. Yeah, these nations who are conducting this war against Iran are absolutely, you know, jelly for brains, bonkers. They are complete and utter lunatics. So you have to factor that in. Yeah, this is the behavior of lunacy. It's not, you know, it's not rational behavior. This is not, you're not going to get, you know, smooth, straight lines of predictability here. You know, Satan Yahoo is a absolute monster
over the territory that you've claimed. The reality is that the Iranians have been preparing this battle for about 20 years. They developed this very effective asymmetrical warfare strategy of using drones and ballistic missiles from afar, hidden in underground bases, to hit and strike American assets around the Middle East. It's almost like guerrilla warfare. And historically, a imperial power has had great difficulties in containing guerrilla warfare. Yeah. So unfortunately, the Americans don't have a long-term strategy of how to win this war. Trump is still hoping for a quick strike, a knockout punch, and he believes that the American Marines can deliver this knockout punch.
Liking this video? And don't just watch, hit like, share, and subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head.
I'm going to have to skip this, Mehdi. Sorry, dude. Let's go back.
Journalism. You have made a lot of predictions. Some have called you China's Nostradamus. How would you respond to those who say, sure, you guessed that Trump would win in 2024 and he'd go to war with Iran, but that wasn't based on geopolitical insights or game theory? People who follow American politics or world politics could have guessed that. I think I and many others were warning that Trump could win in 2024 and that he would escalate with Iran, as he did in his first term when he killed Hasan.
I was pretty sure that Trump was going to win. Not that I was, you know, but I was pretty sure he was going to win for the simple fact that I just knew that Kamala wasn't going to win. So it wasn't that hard. It wasn't that hard. Just knew that Kamala weren't going to win. Just like, no, there's too many, you know, they haven't, yeah, it just wasn't going to happen. So, you know, I just need to now tag on one more prediction after that in terms of, oh, Trump's going to win and he's going to start ICE. And now, do I get a channel? This is the level of, because I know people are saying, oh, well, but it's like, it's not, you still have to quantify what's actually been predicted successfully, and it's not that broad. That's I think that goes without, you know, goes without question.
Qasem Soleimani.
Right. So I think that if you've been following the news very closely, then it was actually pretty straightforward to make these three predictions, right? Because in Trump's first term, as you mentioned, Trump did have a history of escalating conflict with Iran. The biggest escalation was when Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And quite frankly, America and Iran should have gone to war during that time. But because
isn't it crazy on a side note how leaders in America just sign the death warrants of leaders, politicians, democratically elected or not, religious leaders? Just, yeah, he says so flippantly, and everyone does, you know, oh, you know, sign the assassination of, you know, ordered the assassination of, like, what are we talking about here? Do you understand, like, how evil these people are? This is what I mean. This is why I get beyond the surface level discussion. What irritates me more than anything is that the world is so desensitized. This world is so desensitized to white barbarity. And yes, I am making it about race, because when we talk about the West, we're talking about white barbarity. That's what we're talking about, the white nations, okay? Their ability to be barbarous, to be monstrous towards all other nations around the world, and to never have any kind of consequence for it. As long as a white man is killing someone darker than him, no one cares. As long as he's invading a nation of people that are darker than him, no one cares. As long as he's assassinating a leader, changing the leadership structure, putting in a puppet, someone who was born, bred, and educated in their nation, they'll take that person and they will insert them as a ruler. Don't believe me, go to Ivory Coast right now. President Ouattara was a Frenchman, okay? A puppet with his white French wife, who was placed there after they overthrew the democratically elected leader, Laurent Gbagbo, after a French invasion, which saw 4,000 Ivorians killed in the streets of Ivory Coast. And this media that we cover, that loves to turn around and go, oh, this person's racist, didn't even cover it, didn't even mention it. Most people in the West didn't even know that this regime change occurred in the Ivory Coast under the auspices of the French. Because white barbarity has no accountability. White men are not accountable to anyone. And if the Epstein trials didn't show you that, I don't know what will. They're not accountable to anyone. They literally go around the world doing whatever they can or whatever they want. And then the worst thing about it is, at the end of it all, they play victim more than any other group, any other ethnic group. We actual victims of their barbarity have learned to live with them so much and to barely complain. They complain about everything. Literally, oh, we're being persecuted. Oh, it's like, do you not live in the same world? When was the last time a brown population killed 1 million white people? When was the last time a black population decided it didn't like the ruler of a white nation and had them assassinated? When was the last time a brown, black, or yellow population turned around and said, we want regime change there, so we're going to wipe out half of their nation? When was the last time a brown, black, or yellow population turned around and said, you know what, we don't like this European nation, so we're going to give guns, bombs, everything. We're going to militarily arm their most problematic dissident population so they can rise up and overthrow their government. Tell me when, anybody, tell me when this has happened. Tell me when the last time this has happened in recorded history. the desensitization that we have across this world to white barbarity is the single biggest problem that we face. And that's why people like Trump can do what they want. Everyone's like, oh, Trump, oh my God, he's so unhinged. Trump is a result of the world that you guys allowed him to spawn into. This is what you get. He is the consequence of unbridled, unrestricted white male exuberance. White men just doing whatever they want, whenever they want, to whomever they want, for the history of mankind. Yeah, that's what you get. You get Trumps at the end of that. And white men will still find a way of blaming those actions and blaming the consequences of this monster on everybody else. They'll still find a way. Okay. They're doing it right now. Trump's screwing up the economy, making everyone starting new wars, this, that, and the other. Whose fault is it? It's the immigrants. It's the immigrants' fault. Get the immigrants out, and then we'll be able to live, making America great again. Then we'll be able to live like it was the good old days. Uncontrolled, unbridled barbarism.
Because of the escalation efforts on both sides, we prevented World War III during that time. But Trump was under tremendous pressure from his allies and from his donors to start a conflict in the Middle East. So if Trump had won a second term, then he would have started the conflict. I was pretty confident that he would start the conflict if he had won in 2020. But fortunately, he lost. And so now the question then was, what is the likelihood that he would get a second term? Would he win in 2024? And then as I watched the news, it seemed pretty obvious to me that the Democrats were hopeless, that they were not delivering on the promises, that there were a lot of issues. For example, what was happening in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, that was making American voters disillusioned with the Democratic establishment. And so I thought that Trump would have a very good chance of winning in 2024. And if he won in 2024, I think there's a very strong likelihood that he would attack Iran. And so all three predictions have panned out.
Just on your...
Well, two of the three predictions have panned out, because the third one still hasn't panned out, which is the loss of the war. Once again, rooting for him to be right, but hasn't quite delivered yet.
Or predictions. I just want to be clear here. Nikki Haley was key to your prediction about Iran. You said Trump would pick her as his running mate, and as vice president, she would pressure Trump into war with Iran. She's a notorious hawk. But he didn't pick her. And his current vice president, J.D. Vance...
Did he say she's a notorious whore? Sorry, once again.
With Iran, she's a notorious hawk.
Oh, notorious tour? Well, I didn't say whore, so that's the main. I was gonna say, whoa, that's strong, Mehdi. Okay, cool. Okay.
But he didn't pick her. And his current vice president, J.D. Vance, is widely seen as a skeptic of this war. So you admit you got that wrong?
Yes, absolutely. So, so I was thinking of what Trump's electoral strategy would be in 2024. And I think that if he picked Nikki Haley, this would be a tremendous boost to his campaign, because Nikki Haley would be very popular among neocons in Washington, D.C. She would also be very popular among suburban white women. That was key to Biden's victory in 2020. So I made the prediction that he would pick Nikki Haley. But at the same time, I was not completely sure about it, because I also felt that J.D. Vance also had a good opportunity to be selected. And I also said during my lecture, making the prediction that Nikki Haley would be his running mate, that depending on whether or not he picked Nikki Haley or J.D. Vance, this would determine how we can foresee or understand Trump's second term. And so...
well, shout out to him if he did narrow it down to the two. That takes a degree of expertise. So even though he got the Nikki Haley one wrong, and some people would say that that's an invalidation of his predictions, I won't. I will say the fact that he also narrowed J.D. Vance down. Yeah, well done. Fair play.
If he had picked Nikki Haley, then he would have been he would have been fully committed into the neocon project of regime change throughout the Middle East, of supporting Israel, of establishing American imperial power throughout the world. He didn't pick Nikki Haley. Instead, he picked the complete opposite, who is J.D. Vance, who is America first, who has always been skeptical of American imperial overreach. But not only that, he also picked Tulsi Gabbard to be his director of national intelligence. And so these are the two major skeptics.
I'm gonna skip ahead now and get to the point where Mehdi grills him a bit more, because we're an hour in now and I didn't want to just watch everything. I feel like, is it coming now? I wonder if he's got timestamps. That'd be great. Timestamps. No, there's no timestamps. Has anyone stamped it? No. All right, let me let it play for
all of this war in the Middle East. And what I will say about picking these two individuals is that it shows that Trump has an off-ramp strategy, where if this war goes sideways and the American public is up in arms and he's losing in the polls, then Trump may decide to pivot back to America first and have J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard elevated in the administration over individuals such as Marco Rubio and Peter Hegseth.
Yes.
So that, yeah.
I suspect he will blame Pete Hegseth if all of this goes sideways, as it is. Where does China fall into all of this? You're a Chinese Canadian. You're based in Beijing. China clearly stands to gain from a failed U.S. war with Iran. How much of your views are reflective of China's views, the Chinese government's views, the CCP's views?
Right. So the official Chinese Communist Party line is that China is committed to global peace and to global trade that benefits all. China wants a win-win globalized system in which people are trading peacefully and which everyone is committed to world peace. And so China has...
See, here's the thing. When it comes to China, I don't believe him. I think he's definitely got more backing of the Chinese state. But what he does have that America doesn't have is he has the backdrop of Chinese, for want of a better word, he has the backdrop of Chinese non-interference in the geopolitics of other nations. Because you can say what you want about the Chinese. You can say, oh, they're this, that, and the other. Oh, they're colonizing Africa. But you know what China doesn't have a track record of? Interfering with other people's leadership, interfering with other nations, invading other nations. Just like everybody else, China doesn't have that history. China doesn't have that backdrop. And as a result of not having that history and not having that backdrop, he can make statements like this. And journalists can roll their eyes and be all kind of like, oh, well, if that was us, we'd be saying what you're saying. But it's like, well, you don't get that luxury because you're from the UK, okay? And your government is are tyrannical, okay? the list of bodies and the list of presidents and the list of parliaments and the list of governments that you've interfered in, the list of genocides that you've funded, they're not even comparable. So China gets to play ignorant in this. It gets to play, hey, we're not really involved. And people just have to give them the benefit of the doubt. You are forced to give China the benefit of the doubt because their track record speaks for them. Just like the track record of the US, UK, NATO, EU, etc. speaks for them. Their track record speaks for them. You are invaders. You are pillagers. You are barbarians. You are murderers. You are... you're the ones who sign off on assassins. You are kidnappers. Now that's a new one that you can add to the list of heinous crimes that you guys do. But you're not like China. Yeah, so he can play this game, and I fair play to him.
Has come out vocally criticizing both Iran and the United States. The United States for starting this war, but also Iran for attacking the GCC energy infrastructure. Remember that China relies heavily on Qatar liquefied natural gas, as is the case with other countries in Europe. So China looks at what's happening in the Middle East, and China, I think...
By the way, ExxonMobil own 50% of Qatar's liquefied natural gas. I was shocked to find out. I knew that obviously a few years ago when I used to live in the region. How much of the Qatari infrastructure is owned by single American organizations is actually shocking. So when you're turning around, you're looking at all of these, multiple, multi-millionaires / billionaires that these economies have produced. Just bear in mind there are single organizations earning as much as the entire economies of these nations, which is a shocking thought, but it's true. 50% of Qatari liquefied natural gas is owned by ExxonMobil.
Is working very hard diplomatically to come to an agreement. Unfortunately, right now, China doesn't have much leverage over either the United States or Iran. In fact, many analysts believe that this war was started in part to economically strangle China, because China depends on a lot of its economy. A lot of its economy is based on accessing cheap energy from overseas, specifically the GCC. China imports 40% of its energy needs from the GCC. And so if the GCC were to stop energy production, then the Chinese economy would be in a lot of trouble. And this would give Trump a lot of negotiating leverage over China in the upcoming talks scheduled for mid-May. And I believe that what's going to happen is that, because the Chinese are extremely pragmatic and very business orientated, and I think that Trump and China will sign a landmark deal where China agrees to buy a lot of energy from North America.
You're full of praise for China's role in trying to get peace in the Middle East. Here's what I don't get. You were caught filming protests by Chinese workers, famously in 2002 as a freelance journalist at the time. You were suspected by the Chinese government of spying. You were deported from China. Reporters Without Borders protested your deportation at the time. How did you get back into China? And why is it, some of your critics say, you have so little to say about China's role in all of this geopolitics? Is it because you're not allowed to currently?
I think a logical person would say, if everything that Mehdi Hasan just said is true, then he's learned his lesson. I don't think many people, particularly Chinese citizens, have gone up against the Chinese government and it's gone well for them. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the story of, is it Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, who became a multi-billionaire, as you can imagine, became incredibly powerful, and as a result became incredibly outspoken. Well, he disappeared. Yeah, Jack Ma disappeared. And I think he came back, but he disappeared for a long time. And for a long time, people were speculating that he had been, done away with. But the Chinese government don't play, because he had power, he had money, and they are just like, hey, we're just gonna kidnap your ass. You got way too much to say. So you don't, that's the one thing when it comes to, internal domestic dissidents within China, is they don't really play that game. Where I guess I do like them is they do have accountability. One of the reasons why China has success in its more, it's kind of like neo, it's not communist, they're blatantly capitalist, obviously, but they kind of have this kind of like neo-communist political structures, because they have zero tolerance for corruption. Politicians who are outed as people who've committed fraud or defrauding the public in any way, shape, or form, they are executed. China don't play. Yeah. So if you're someone and you have your other position of, political, political standing, and you're fine to be abusing your power, for your own enrichment, they will, yeah. Yeah, they'll hit you with the capital. Yeah, the capital P. Yeah, they don't play. They absolutely don't play. I would love to see that in the UK, by the way. I would love to see Parliament, the corruption in Parliament cleaned up. These corrupt, thieving dogs who have all British people living in abject misery, which is why they are constantly, chewing their own tail in terms of attacking the other, different groups. It's always like there's always internal infighting that has been orchestrated by the media and the government, to set people against immigrants, or set the young against the old, or to set, man against women. There's always some kind of infighting that they're funding, because what they're doing is they're busy, committing the worst fraud and defrauding and increasing the wealth gap in the UK, which has been increased artificially by corrupt governments for eons now. But certainly at least, certainly intensively in the last 30 years, that's intensified greatly in the UK, this corruption. It would be great to see some politicians get the chop. It would be awesome. I'd love to see it.
Right. So when I started as a young journalist, I was subcontracted by PBS to do a documentary on China's WTO entry. And one major issue about China's WTO entry, of course, is worker rights. And at this time in China, there was a major restructuring of the state-owned enterprise system. So I was dispatched to northeastern China to film a worker protest. Unfortunately, the place was swarming with police spies. And I was arrested and interrogated for 2 days. I was held incognito for 48 hours, which is the maximum by Chinese law. And I signed a confession saying that I was a reporter and working in China illegally as a reporter. And the decision was made to deport me without charging me with any crime. And so
he signed a confession. That's the guy. Like, yeah, leave this guy alone. He signed a confession, man. When there's signing of confessions, that you haven't read. I think the technical term for that is called duress. So yeah, man, come on. He's been through the ringer in China, it sounds like.
I was allowed to come back in the country, but I was.
And also, it's a little bit rich, isn't it, when British people get their knickers in a bunch about Chinese propaganda. Like, these people are the most virulent, anti-Chinese propagandists of the lot. The moment China beats the UK or the US in a trade deal, they will start, oh, it's neo-imperialism, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. They start projecting their own deficiencies onto another nation, even without having any evidence of it. So it's just rich that they're always so quick. It's funny, in the UK, for instance, it's like they always had this massive support for the Dalai Lama, which even when I was young, I always knew was just about attacking China. I always knew that. I was just like, oh, Burma, oh, the Dalai Lama, oh, he's this wonderful spiritual man. The Dalai Lama is a peed. Yeah, he got outed. He's disgusting. Yeah, there's a picture of him tongue wrestling a young boy. Yeah, a little boy, disgusting man. And now he's been fully outed as a what. Yeah, and he was on Epstein as well. He's Dalai Lama. This is their champion. Because the thing about the British media is they love to find someone who, the enemy of their enemy is their friend, basically. So as long as they find a group that don't like the group that they're trying to vilify, they will fund them, they will televise them, they will give them, they'll give them infamy, they'll do everything. They'll like say, yeah, have everything. Oh, we back you, What's your name again? Dalai Lama, yeah, Dalai Lama. They only do that because they hate China. That's the only reason that happened. Now, they did or didn't do their background check on this individual, because now it's like, whoop, this guy always was a piece of what. But it doesn't matter, because he was the enemy of their enemy. And this is something they do in Africa, everywhere. Even like, Libyan war, when they were back in Benghazi, talk to the Libyans. The Benghazites were the worst. They were the worst. They were the troublemakers of the nation. They were the foreigners. They weren't even classified as being an indigenous population in Benghazi. They were the ones looking for Arab supremacy. The rest of the Libyan population didn't even classify themselves as being Arab. But who did the UK and the US come in and fund and arm and ultimately use as their proxy to overthrow the government they didn't want? The dissidents, the people who were unhappy. This is just the way that they play ball when it comes to the rest of the world, So I'm not really here for the I'm not like some pro-China person, but I'm not. Same time, I'm not really here for the anti-Chinese propaganda. you know, I know how the West spins its crap, and I don't fall for it.
Deported. So that was the story.
If they suspected you of being a spy, how did they let you back in? China's not known for being that trusting.
They suspected me of being a spy, but after a 48-hour investigation, after doing a thorough background check on me, they concluded that I was not a spy, and I was a journalist working to film in a worker protest.
But it wasn't just 2002. In 2017, we checked, you wrote an op-ed for CNN.com, headline, China's media enables tyranny and corruption. In that piece, you praised the US media as the world's free speech defender of last resort. You said, in China, power trumps truth. And China's Communist Party, you said, maintains its iron grip on power by controlling what's said in the media and what's taught in the classroom. Do you stand by those views from less than a decade ago?
So in 2017, when I was asked by
Mehdi's deep for that one. Mehdi's deep for that one, man. Mehdi's deep for that one. That's like a horrible setup. He knows the man's calling him from China right now. You know what I mean? He's saying he's just listed out. He's just read out, you know, a verbatim a speech that he knows could have my man beheaded, and he's like, "Oh, do you stand for that? Do you still stand for that?" Mehdi doing it dirty, man. No, man, Mehdi, you out of pocket. You straight up out of pocket for that one.
By CNN to write an op-ed, I did stand by those views at that time because, like everyone else, in 2016, when Donald Trump won the election, I thought this would be very bad for American democracy because he was clearly not a believer in free speech.
Yes.
He called the news media fake news. And so I wrote the op-ed for American audience saying, like, the greatest treasure, the greatest wealth of America is the First Amendment, the right to speak whatever you want. And I contrast that with China, where you're not allowed to say whatever you want, where you are very much monitored by the government. Even today, I do not have a Chinese online media presence. I do not say anything online. I do not talk to reporters from China because I'm conscious that whatever I say online could be used against me.
But hold on, they allow you to be on this show?
I also think that America's freedom of speech law is slightly to its detriment. I think this is going to sound wild, but I think it's too extreme. And I think, you know, it's created this culture in America where people say the most wild things, and then the excuse is, well, it's just words. It's just words, freedom of speech. And it's like people have this complete disconnect that words are what engender actions, okay? Before someone does something, before someone carries out an act of extremism or an act of violence or an act of, it always is preceded by words. Words are what cause that, okay? Every single school pure in America has been inspired by the words of hateful people. So it always feels like, you know, particularly in the American case, that there needs to be, like, for instance, we have freedom of speech in the UK. I think they're a little bit more serious about their hate speech laws here, though. And sometimes that goes awry, I have to admit, because obviously the you-know-whos are just like, everyone's an anti, you're an anti-S, you're an anti-S, everyone is an anti, you know, anti-little hat. They just throw that word up every other, you know, you can't really say much against those people. But at the same time, you don't see people going really wild with the hate speech. Whereas in America, it's just totally unbridled. It's just like people just say the wildest things. I'm like, how is people just getting away with talking that loose? It's like, I don't know, man. It just feels like, I know it's a slippery slope and it's like a thread you don't want to pull out. But I don't think I like America's variant, if I'm going to be totally honest with you. I don't like America's variant. I think it's too extreme, and I think that we see the negative aspects of it far too much, far more than the positives, if I'm going to be totally honest with you.
They allow you to be on YouTube. You get past the great firewall that you criticized in that CNN piece. How come?
Look, the reality is that the best way to understand my situation,
and I guess the way I'd qualify that is, I'd say, if you have freedom of speech but you don't have protections, And this is the issue. If you've got freedom of speech and you don't have protection, then freedom of speech really isn't freedom of speech. It only works one way. Do you understand? So it's like, yeah, it only works one way. It's like, okay, but if a certain, you know, portion or certain, you know, population within the, you know, within the kind of, yeah, within the wider populace doesn't have the protections of the state, then free speech only works for the group that is protected. The group that isn't protected, when they exercise their free speech, they're going to be abused. They're going to be thrown in prison. They're going to be accosted. They're going to be, you know, they're not going to have. So it's an illusion. And I guess this is probably why I don't like the American variant. Yeah, this is why I don't like the American variant, because it's really only freedom of speech for one group. The other group, or the other groups that try the freedom of speech thing, will find themselves arrested or thrown in prison. You know, they'll find themselves at the tail end of a very selective application of law. So my kind of thing is like, well, if it's only working for one group, then fuck it. Excuse my French. Let me move on now. I'm kind of a bit bored of this Mehdi Hasan thing now. I want to cover a few topics now. So we've done Jiang. We didn't get to the part, but spoiler alert, it gets there and he's like, hey, you're not really a professor. And he's like, hey, yeah, I never said I was a professor. They said I was a professor. And then he's like, oh, well, you know, well, you didn't deny that you're a professor. He's like, yeah, I leave the name because it's cool and it sounds all right. And I'm using it right now and it's not harming anyone. And then they wrap it up. So yeah, cool. That's that done. Let's move on. What's this one that I wanted to move on to? So this is Delroy Lindo honors his mother. By the way, complete change of topic now, guys. Just letting you know. So the title of the video should probably change. I wonder if I can edit it. Maybe I will, but I can't bother. Delroy Lindo honors his mother as he uncovers their family history, finding their roots, ancestry. Now, the reason I pulled this up, this is 4 weeks ago. I've got a really massive problem with Skipgates. Okay, I really don't like him. I think he's a propagandist, and I think that global DNA and genetics results are not telling people the full picture that they think they're telling them, and they don't understand. A lot of people haven't bothered to do the, you know, the research, to do the groundwork, to do the investigation in regards to how genetic studies works. Most people don't know the difference between, you know, Y DNA, mitochondrial DNA, autosomal DNA. Most of them don't know the difference between uniparental lineages versus, you know, whole genome ancestral results. And most people don't know how groupings are being identified. And as a result, when they get their DNA results, they're expecting too much from them, and they don't know the limitations of the results that they've been given. So yeah, this is I saw this and I shelved this a long time ago, so I don't think I've even watched it fully, but I wanted to just kind of like watch this with you guys and see what we get out of this. So
pieces of myself are being filled in. Mm-hmm. If this is a jigsaw, you know, this is another piece in the jigsaw.
That's Henry Louis Gates, also known as Skip Gates, is interviewing him, and I don't like him. I'll be honest with you, I do not like the dude at all. I've always found him to be a tool of the enemy, personally. You know, I don't think he's good for the black community. I think he spreads a lot of lies and does it under the guise. He's a closeted Uncle Ruckus, in my opinion.
Actor Delroy Lindo was raised almost entirely by his mother, a woman named Anna Moncrief. And though the two were very close, Anna rarely spoke about her past. So Delroy came to me knowing nothing about her roots. We set out to change that.
Now, if you're gonna change or discover someone's roots, you can't do it with genetics. Let me make that very, very clear. If you're going to try and investigate someone's roots, you do genealogy, okay? And there's a big difference between genealogy and genetics. And I don't know which they're going to do for this, but I'm going to say if they start to make conclusions and they haven't conducted a genealogical investigation, then it's almost entirely valueless. People think that your genetics are going to tell you exactly what village you're from. It does not work that way. It does not work that way. You need the genealogy. You need to know who people proceed from, who their ancestors were, etc. You can have, and this is very common in Africa, you can have DNA that looks totally foreign existing in a certain geolocation for tens, hundreds, even thousands of years. Okay, and that genetics pattern is there, and the only other place it is in friggin' Korea as well. But that's common in Africa because the genetic diversity you get in Africa are literally off the chains. So I'll be interested to see whether or not they take a genealogical versus a genetic approach here to tell Delroy. And this is the thing I don't like about Skip Gates. He likes to turn around and tell people, you're not from here, or you're from here, or you're not. And I hate that because it's not scientific. But let's see anyway.
Our search began in Jamaica, where Anna was born in May of 1914. Records show that her parents were a couple named Henry.
It's a shout out. They're doing genealogy. So cool. All right. So I'm going to loosen my leash a little bit because they are doing genealogy. So I'm happy to see that.
Henry Moncrief and Ida Lang. And while we don't know anything more about the nature of their relationship, we do know it didn't last. Because in 1928, Henry married a woman named Letitia Beckford.
So this is my grandfather.
Yes.
Finally marrying somebody else.
Someone else. Yeah. And your mom was 14 years old at the time when her father married another woman.
I don't know what I didn't know this, but it all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And oh man. It's not the specifics of my grandfather marrying another woman, not the specifics of that per se, but it's consistent with some things that my aunt told me about certain things that had happened that impacted them as children.
Mm-hmm.
And that some of these things that happened when they were children had impacted my mother very negatively, harshly. Now, I don't know if it's this per se, but it's just consistent with an impression that one has that gradually becomes less impressionistic and more specific. It's as if figures are emerging through a fog.
We now began to follow the roots of Delroy's grandmother, Ida, tracking back to her grandparents, a couple named James Lang and Margaret Campbell. They're Delroy's great-great-grandparents, and we believe they were both born into slavery in the early 1800s. Searching for evidence of their lives, we uncovered a registry of Jamaica's enslaved population from the year 1826. It lists the names of thousands of slaves, including several hundred owned by a planter who shared the surname of Delroy's ancestors, Lang. And one of those names stood out.
Margaret Campbell, color, Negro, age 2, African or Creole.
So we have gone back into the bowels of slavery and found your ancestor by name and found the name of the white man
who owned her.
Yeah.
And that's where the Lang name came from.
That's right. You got it. She was held at the Goshen estate. We've marked its location right there.
Oh gosh,
You been anywhere near there?
no,
You gonna go there now?
absolutely,
Because you got roots there.
absolutely, absolutely.
See, I've got my thoughts about. Anyway, I'm gonna let this play through at this stage because this is actually quite interesting. But I've got my thoughts about a lot of what's taking place here.
Margaret was likely born on this estate in the early 1820s. And as we combed through the estate's archives, we made a precious discovery. Margaret's mother, a woman named Louisa Thomas, is listed by name on multiple documents. Louisa is Delroy's third great-grandmother, and she was born in the year 1797.
Wow.
So making sense of the Lang name, it seems only her son bore the Lang name, yeah, which they say came from the slave owners, which never made sense to me, by the way, because names carry so much power, particularly at that moment in history. Names gave people access to ownership and inheritance. So the idea of giving slaves, you know, a rich family giving their slaves their name just has never made any sense to me, but I'm not going to argue that at the moment. What's interesting that Margaret's name wasn't changed and her mother's name wasn't changed, but the son's name was changed to Lang. So does that mean that was a result of the slavery, or is that a result of perhaps the fathering of that child? Not at the moment, I'm just asking the questions and letting this play out. It's quite interesting.
What would your mom have made of this?
I'm sure my mother would have appreciated this, man. Because it's, you know, it's healing.
Yeah, it is.
And if anybody needed to be healed, it was my mom and myself. Yes, but my mom needed healing. My mom needed a laying on of hands.
Shout out, by the way. I've got a lot of love for Delroy Lindo. I don't know why. I don't know why. He's one of those guys that I've always just like, obviously he's a Londoner, so I'm gonna have that yeah, that kind of connection there. But I've always just had kind of like a little bit of a, yeah, I don't know. Shout out Delroy Lindo.
My mom needed a laying on of hands that she didn't even know she needed.
Discovering our ancestors can change our lives, helping us to understand more fully who we are, where we came from, and how we're all connected to a much larger world. To see more incredible family history.
Okay, so that's that. Yeah, there you go. That was semi-interesting. It wasn't genetic in the end at all, which was cool. I have my thoughts about some of the stuff that was shared there, the entire narrative and the way that we look at things. But I feel like right now is not the time or the place where I feel like I'm going to go into detail about that. I'm gonna let that lie. I'll attack that subject in a broader way, I'm sure, in the very near future. Let's move on. AES, okay, the Sahelian Alliance, or the Alliance of Sahelian States, Alliance Stat Sahel, or whatever it is. They're not in the clear, okay? Some heinous moves are being made. And so I wanted to just share details of the kind of things that I've been uncovering. I'm sure they're going to come out of it. But it's just good for us to be aware of what's taking place at the moment. So let's have a watch of this together.
No, the world is not a fair place, right?
Okay, so sorry, and this video is coming from Zach Makwasa, sorry. European Union attacks Niger.
You should start to be nice with people that are your friends, your family, your neighbors, your countrymen, your African people. You need to be nice to them. because you're part of the same group. Because if you don't, you're going to live the consequences. You understand that? You know, you don't have to pretend you're somebody else, right? Wherever you are, those are your people. You need to take care of them, look after them, right? Now, fellas, thank you very much for stopping. I appreciate you. Today is a beautiful day. We need to talk about something very interesting, and we're going to be very, very quick. The European Parliament, right here, where all the people that harassed everybody else in the world historically by killing, unaliving, and taking their land.
Exactly what I was saying earlier. Okay, the European Parliament, they're devils of the globe who go around doing whatever they want, and then, you know, passing judgment and acting like they're a moral superiority when they haven't done anything morally superior in the last 300 years. Everything they've done has shown them to be morally inferior to the rest of the globe. They are literally backwards barbarians who have promoted themselves as being some upstanding beings. And I like to remind them and some of the idiots, you know, the Zanus and the Bantu City Diaries out there, these people that you're lauding are the most barbaric, backwards and wicked people on this planet. And the people that you're condemning have the ancestry of people who actually know what diplomacy is, actually have attempted to be agreeable to these people, but these people are not an agreeable breed of people.
They sat together to discuss what's a matter in another continent. Which continent? This one, Africa. Precisely this country you see on the map. It's called Niger. What are they talking about? They were talking about a probable resolution, which they have passed. What's the resolution about? They were condemning the arbitrary detention and demanding unconditional release of Mohamed Bazoum, this man here, and his wife. Now, what is the context? Mohamed Bazoum is the ex-president of the country, Niger. You see,
what has that got to do with them? This is the thing. Always interfering with nations that have got nothing to do with them. They're literally just like an uncontrolled, unmuzzled dog that goes around devouring anything that it sees that it doesn't like the way it moves. They are just horrendous beings.
The map, that's Niger. He was a very good friend of the French and the Europeans. He allowed them to access the goods and the beauty of
what I said earlier about them placing their puppet leaders, normally who have been trained, been schooled, been educated, and been propagandized in their nations to do their absolute will, their absolute bidding. I mean, he doesn't even look like a native Nigerian, but do they care? No, they don't care. They don't care. They just want their puppet in charge. I think someone even in the chat mentioned that puppet king in the Iranian king that's in America, and he's only a king because his family were made monarchs by the Americans several decades, almost a century ago. You know, his family were just installed as the monarchs, and so now they continue that lineage of monarchy. These friggin' undeserving. They don't have any lineage, just bastards who have just literally been proclaimed themselves as the royal family of Iran, such as the way of the West.
Of Niger. Niger, one of the biggest producer of this year. It's called the yellow cake, uranium. That's the reason why America is fighting with Iran. Uranium, you know that, eh? Yes, Niger has tons of uranium. Uranium, you can use it for many things. The atomic bomb and many other things. Mohamed Bazoum was a great friend of the French and the Europeans. He allowed them to access uranium. The French bought so much uranium from Mohamed Bazoum that they created electricity. So much electricity, they started selling the electricity to other European countries. Now, the Europeans that you see right here have sat together and discussing what? They need to pass a law.
By the way, this is a very common trend you'll see. And this is why I'm very condemning of the Western populations as a whole. I don't isolate my blame. A lot of people like to do this thing when they kind of like, it's kind of like this, regressus ad infinitum. where they like to basically pass the buck of blame. Oh, it's not America, it's the Republicans. Oh, it's not Republicans, it's MAGA. Oh, it's not MAGA, it's Trump. Oh, it's not Trump, it's the Illuminati. Oh, it's not the Illuminati, it's the Bilderbergs. Oh, it's not the Bilderbergs. And they just keep passing the buck until you don't blame anybody. Everyone's a freaking victim. But when it comes down to it, what you need to do when in the attribution of where a problem lies and the attribution of blame is you need to look for, okay, I'm not concerned with who carries out the act. I want to know who had the power to provide resistance and did not provide resistance. That's what I'm concerned with. Did you have power, position, authority, capability to provide resistance from something wrong happening and did nothing? Okay, if you're sitting on a train and some maniac guy just starts abusing an innocent female traveler, yeah, and literally starts assaulting them in front of you, and you just sit there and you could overpower him, but you just sit there and watch all turn around, oh, it's none of my business, as this maniac assaults, then you are as guilty as the person who's done it. And this is the thing, when it comes to these European types, these European populations, these Westerners, they love to turn a blind eye and twiddle their fingers as their leaders do the most heinous shit possible. They love to turn a blind eye and do absolutely nothing. They do nothing. They sit around and they go, oh, it's horrible. Talk to your average Brit, your average, they don't care. They don't care what their leaders are, but they'll have something very verbal to say about some friggin' immigration law or too many. But when it comes to their leaders actually doing real evil, heinous things, they'll have nothing to say because they are complicit. They are complicit in their silence for these things that are taking place. Look what's happening here. France is the aggressor. France is the proxy state, but the entire EU backs French regime change. When France go in there with their military and they ask for UN troops from the various other EU nations and various other nations to invade an African nation, they know they are going to get 100% backing from the European Union because they're all in agreement. We can't let those Africans get out of place. They're getting too powerful. We know that if they're charging us, they're charging you today, but they'll be charging us tomorrow. And we don't want to pay more than 2p a kilo for our uranium. They don't want to pay the fair price. They don't want to see any black, even brown, but I'm going to focus on black because right now that's what I'm concerned about. They don't want to see any black nation uplifted, economically independent, out of a situation of being, basically mired in poverty, corruption, civil war. That's how they want Africa maintained, and they will all work together for it. And when they all work together for it, who's got to support them? Their entire populations will support them. Their entire populations will support them through apathy and then spreading negative oh, you Africans, oh, you can't never sort yourself out. But they never look at the fact that they are complicit. They are complicit in the oppression of these nations. Let me tell you something right now. It's not just MAGA. All of white America, you are the reason Trump is invading Iran. You are complicit. In fact, even all of Britain, I would say you are complicit. You created the world where he feels safe to do things like that and knows that he'll be okay with it. You created the world where no white leader ever gets prosecuted retrospectively. We walk around in a world where Bush and Blair walk around, whistling. The sun shines bright for them. They're picking daisies. They are retired and living their best life after committing one of the worst genocides in recorded history over a war they started, an illegal war they started over false pretense. Has there been an ICC arrest? Do you see them sitting in International Criminal Court? Do you see them paying for any of their crimes? No. Do you see any of these people that you live around complaining? Do you see any white folk complaining? No. They're okay with it. They don't care. So this is the thing. This is always this I don't allow them to do this kind of like, this kind of regress ad infinitum where they just want to, oh, it's not us, it's them. No, it's you. It's you. You're all complicit. This is proof. You're all complicit when it comes to stuff like this. So it's us against the world. Yeah. The only people that are going to back Niger is us. Okay. We're the only people we have to be verbal about this. Okay. We have to be the ones to back Niger. We have to be the ones to back Mali. We have to be the ones to back Burkina Faso. We have to be the ones to condemn Nigeria and condemn Ghana for being puppets. Yeah, we have to be there because they are never going to support us in this struggle. They're never going to support us. They're going to do what's right for them. And what's right for them is keeping us oppressed.
Or condemning the arbitrary detention of Mohamed Bazoum. Mohamed Bazoum was overthrown by this man here, Tiani. Okay, he was overthrown. Tiani is the president.
Shout out Gianni. Shout out Traore. Shout out Goita. Shout out to my true revolutionary leaders in Africa.
Right now, he's a soldier. First, let's listen to this. Listen to this.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Commissaire. President, Commissioner, dear colleagues, tomorrow we'll be voting on an urgency resolution which I set great heart by. We call for the release of the president of Niger, Mohamed Bazoum. It's the fourth time.
They just called him the president of Niger. Can you imagine that? They're still calling him the president. They're not saying release him as a, extradite him to us. And no, they're saying we call for the president, the release of the president, your puppet that you put in place. They don't care about the general population, who the general population actually want in charge. They don't care. They don't care about the people. These people are so evil. Do you understand how wicked these people are? It's beyond comprehension.
Now, since 26th of July 2023, when the coup took place, the military have basically cut him off from the outside world. He doesn't have.
What about your coups? What about your coups that take place? Your various military coups? What about, like I mentioned earlier, Ouattara? What about him? What about that coup? What about your long-term coups like Kagame of Rwanda? What about those people who have been in Paul Biya? What about these people who are in your pocket, who have been serving forever, okay, who are illegal in terms of their presidencies, how long? They are dictators, they are despots, but you're happy as long as they are giving you the free trade deals that you want and their entire nations are living in abject poverty. That's all that makes you happy.
Access to a phone, and there's been 950 days of unjustified detention. Now he's democratically elected, and he contributes.
Can you believe these people talking about democratically electing? They're friggin' despots. They like to call them democratically elected. It's a joke.
There to jihadist terrorism, arms trafficking, human trafficking, and contributed to regional stability. We can't stand by in silence when a European key ally is imprisoned. We need to...
What? Did he submit? Did he say the quiet part out loud then?
Attention. Now he's democratically elected.
He's domestically democratically elected,
and he contributed there to jihad.
Contributed there to jihadist terrorism.
Terrorism, arms trafficking, human trafficking.
Arms trafficking, human trafficking, and
contributed to regional stability.
Is he saying the quiet part out loud, or is this just a bad? It's just a bad interpretation. I can't figure it out. Because we all know that they are the ones who fund regional instability. We all know that they are the ones who fund Islamist terrorism, but they would never admit it. They would do it, and then while they're doing it, claim it's the other person's fault. So we all know that every single major Islamist group that exists throughout Africa and the Middle East is created by them. They funded them. They single-handedly upkeep them. And that's all of them, from Boko Haram to IS to, Al-Q, whatever you want to, they were all funded and put in place by these people. These are the people that put them in place, that fund them, that create them. A lot of the time they admit it, and then they just then they just basically know that the media is going to induce memory loss on the entire population. So they know they can get away with it. They know that they can admit it today, and then tomorrow the media will just basically induce amnesia upon the entire global population so that everyone forgets that they are the ones who created these groups. So it's like you said the quiet part out loud there, but I don't know.
We can't stand by in silence when a European key ally is imprisoned. We need to show solidarity, and his release is urgent for two.
A European key ally. I'm glad he's saying that quiet part out loud there as well. This is how Trump speaks as well. You know, oh no, he's our ally. He needs to be released. It's nothing to do with democracy. It's to do with the fact that he's our puppet. He does as he's told. By the way, I would not feel any way, shape, or form if they, you know, if he lost his, you know what? Because you know what? Sometimes I think one of Africa's greatest problems that has hindered us from making the necessary progress is that we are far too humane. We're far too humane. And if you're too humane and you're dealing with an inhumane enemy, you will never win. And that's one thing that we've never learned. We always try to deal with them diplomatically, you know, always try to deal with them in the most, they will never come around. They will never change their ways. They are a population of war. They are, you know, this is the only language they understand is violence. They don't understand any other language. You tell me any time anyone's been able to, you know, create an agreement, you know, with a belligerent European state that ended it just because, you know, you said the right words without some kind of violence preceding it. It doesn't happen. This is the only language they understand. So what we can't be is, you know, too sympathetic with their, you know, their puppets, with their plants, with their proxies. We can't be too sympathetic, not in my opinion anyway.
Two main reasons. First of all, on the 2nd of April 2026, his mandate will come to an end. If he's not released before then that has to be seen as a major failure, and a clear message needs to be sent to our partners and their opponents. We are allies. We take our commitment.
If they give him up, that's a sign of weakness, in my opinion. I think they are giving him an ultimatum here, and I think I will understand if Niger does what they need to do. It doesn't matter. You see, the thing about it is, if you play ball with them, it doesn't matter. In fact, one of the biggest kind of like leading indicators that they're about to invade you, yeah, one of the biggest leading indicators that they're about to attack you is you acquiescing to their demands. That's like a turn on for them. That's like, yep, we're going for it. And it happens before every single war. Let me cast your minds back. Iraq war. What happened just before the Iraq war? Saddam Hussein opened the borders of Iraq to the UN's weapons inspectors, gave them full access to all of Iraq's military capabilities. They came in and they said, yep, we have zero evidence of weapons of mass destruction. What happened next? Within a week, Iraq was invaded, because all they found out is they knew exactly what Iraq's military capabilities were. They knew where everything was, and the UN worked in cooperation with the invading forces of the US and the UK to then invade Iraq. Fast forward a few years later, Libya, exactly the same thing. Libya opens up his things. He says, look, I have no nuclear capabilities. Here, have a look in my nation, blah, blah, blah. Gaddafi's opened up everything. He said, look, these are my military capabilities. These are my aerial capabilities, blah, 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 blah. You can see we have no interest in developing nuclear weapons. Oh, very, very interesting. Before you know it, next week, we have the Arab Spring, the uprising. Yeah, this is what they do. Okay, it's a pattern. So if Niger turns around and they release this dirty dog person who they're calling the president. He's just going to go back. He wants to go back. He wants to run back. He wants to tell them all their secrets. He wants to tell them exactly where they got all of their military stationed, this, that, and the other. You don't give them that kind of advantage. He must never see European soil again, as far as I'm concerned, because you know what they're going to do with it. These people don't have any conscience. They don't have any conscience. All they have is their own well-being. That's all they care about. They don't care about the rest of the world.
Seriously, and we want more freedom and more stability. The detention of a democratically elected person is unacceptable. He's imprisoned by a military junta, which is still in power today. We call on the immediate release of President Bazoum and his wife, the restoration of the constitutional order.
That man is no one's president, and he will not be seeing leadership in that nation again. To be clear, he is no one's president, and he will not see leadership again. He'll be lucky if he sees daylight again. He's a bastard, and he's a traitor to the continent of Africa, and Africa should do with him as Europe does with its traitors, in my opinion.
Order and the organization of democratic elections. There is insecurity and a spiral of violence, and the territory now is open to jihadist attacks on religious minorities. We can't stand by and...
This is the same playbook that President Trump was using the other day when he decided to bomb Niger's borders from Nigeria and then claim that he was bombing jihad. He was bombing Niger. Okay, he was sending a message to Niger that he could bomb their facilities, and he had a puppet in Nigeria that would allow him to do so. Okay, same thing. Oh, religious uprising. Oh, we can't allow Christians. Since when? When was the last time you saw a friggin' cop pull over a black person in America and then ask them what religion they are? Hey, are you a Christian? Yeah, I'm Christian. Oh, you're a Christian? Oh, I'm gonna let you. They don't give a shit about black people. Talking about, oh, Christians, oh, we got to defend our Christians. They don't give a crap about Christians. They don't give a crap about religious minorities. Okay, religion comes after race for them. These guys, race comes first. Yeah, if you're black, you are worthless. You can put Christian. This means you're a worthless person that can be used by them. That's all that means to them. It's people sitting here acting like they give a damn what religion a black person is before they unalive them.
See this happen, and we have an urgency resolution on this.
More than 2 years after the coup, Niger's democratically elected president Mohamed Bazoum remains under house arrest without charge, without trial. This is unacceptable. I call for his immediate and unconditional release.
All these devils can get it the same, in my opinion, man. All these devils can get it the same. See what I mean? They're all the same. They can all get it, man. They're wicked. They're wicked, and they want nothing more than our downfall. We cannot have any mercy for those who colluded them.
Not only for him, but for all those arbitrarily detained.
So we need to talk about this. Why? Because this is very interesting. I mean, it's nice to hear them saying, you know what, we need Mohamed Bazoum to be released from detention, because the man is still detained in his house up until now. In 2023, he was arrested. He was kicked out of power. He's still in prison. Not in prison, but he's in...
He's lucky he gets to stay in his house. I think they've done him a solid. They've done him a solid, but they're still calling him president. So they don't want him released. They don't care about him being released. They want him in power. That's two different things.
In his house with his wife. Now, it's very interesting to hear Europeans saying we need to get him out. It's unacceptable. But in the meantime, a couple of days ago, Venezuela was taken by special force where the president was kidnapped, taken to another country. But no European nation has asked for the Venezuelan president to be released.
What an excellent analogy there as well, or comparison, I should say. What an excellent comparison. Okay, where is this same energy for the release of the Venezuelan president who's been kidnapped by a foreign, not even by a coup, but by a foreign leader? Goodness me.
Isn't that interesting? Let me repeat myself because you didn't hear that. Venezuela was attacked a couple of days ago. Okay, they took the president. He was kidnapped, blinded, and taken all the way to the United States of America, where he was thrown in jail. And no European made a noise about it or talking about it.
And this is exactly what I said before, because they all play ball. They all play ball. They all, their little quiet protest. Oh, that was, it didn't even take, in the UK, it didn't even take 24 hours. We were hearing about this and we were like, everyone was in, oh my God, did you hear what Trump did? He kidnapped the president. The UK media, and I'm not just talking about mainstream media, I'm talking about even online media, people who would see themselves as being left, how quickly they changed their tune from, you know, a president has kidnapped a standing leader, killed 40, by the way, killed 40, I think was the number, Venezuelans in the process, murdered them in their own nation. That's murder. It wasn't an invasion. It was literally, they went into a nation, they murdered 40 people, they kidnapped the president. And how quickly they changed their tune to, oh, he was a monster. All of a sudden, this president, who they didn't even know what his flipping name was yesterday, the day comes and now everyone's talking about, oh, he was a monster, he needed to go. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Yeah, that's the democratically elected leader of that nation. Okay, you don't get to call him a monster and to oust him because you don't like him, and you're running cover for friggin' Trump, because these people will always stand shoulder to shoulder and draw sides of each other. You can't reason with them. You can't reason with them. No African or Arab nation could behave like this and get away with it. They wouldn't tolerate it. So this is the thing about them.
Why is it so interesting when it comes to Africans? Then they have these voices. They have to tell you what to do. They have to remind you about democracy and rule of law. But when it's about them doing things to other people, nobody cares. Why is it weird that when Russia goes to Ukraine, everybody's up in arm and angry and stuff, but the other people can go to Iran and bomb and nobody says a word? Are you still believing that we believe in a fair world? That is crazy.
Compare the condemnation of Putin when the Ukrainian war, which had far more, you know, precursor dialogue, far more, you know, out ramps for the Ukrainians, far, you know, before that had to be escalated to violence. Yeah. And to be honest with you, if you know the backstory of that, Russia really didn't have a choice, because Ukraine was essentially offering their nation up wholly to be occupied by NATO and make themselves a very convenient station by which Russia could be attacked. And Russia was like, no, we're not having that. Yeah, this is how you're going to conduct yourselves. And Ukraine turned around and essentially said no. So they said, okay, cool, we're gonna do what we need to do to defend ourselves. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, to be quite frank. I couldn't care less. Literally, I couldn't care less. If someone asked me, what do you care very little about? At the top of my list would be Russia versus Ukraine. I don't care. I don't care what they could obliterate each other. They could wipe both each other off the map. I don't care. What do I care? None of my business. But what is interesting is what he's mentioned there. It's the double standard. It's the widespread condemnation of, and this was unanimous, widespread and unanimous condemnation of Putin that lasts to this day. Yeah. Versus the widespread acceptance. Kind of like, oh, I mean, it's kind of like, oh, don't do it, Trump. Why did you invade? But now he's invaded. It's like, oh, well, what should we do now to adjust to this new world where he's invaded? No one's turning around and saying this guy is a monster. Stop him. And that's the big difference that's being made there.
Now, let's look into this. Tiani overthrew Bazoum very simply. Okay, Tiani was a commander in charge of Bazoum's presidential guard. That's why they say you must be very careful who you put around you, right? He was his bodyguard. He overthrew him. Why? Because, number one, security had gotten worse in the country. A lot of jihadists and all these extremists killing people. Number two, the economy was failing and the people were suffering. Number three, so much foreign interference. French people were controlling the economy of the country. So the guard said to the president, Mr. President, I'm not going to kill you, but you're not going to be president anymore. Some people say the reason why he overthrew Bazoum is because he knew that Bazoum was going to take him out of his position, because Bazoum was just about to change, stuff and all that stuff. So he saw that as an opportunity. If I'm being released from this job, maybe this is a great opportunity for me to do what I have to do. Now, the question is, what has Tiani done this far since he removed Bazoum? Number one, he ordered the withdrawal of French, Americans, Germans, and Italian troops from his country. These people used to stay in the country for nothing, supposedly fighting against jihadists and terrorists. But they were not doing anything because
the removal of military bases is so important for any African nation to move. And what you've found happening concurrently with the removal of these military bases across the Sahel is the restationing of these bases in ECOWAS regions, or I should say compliant ECOWAS regions. Nations like Ghana, Benin, Nigeria, who have been inexplicably just opening their doors wider and wider and wider, which is just like, it's painful for me as a Nigerian witnessing how much we are essentially just offering ourselves to the Western nations, the Western hegemony. It's just like, it's painful to watch, because we are not in a position. Nigeria right now is in a position where it really quite literally needs no one. It needs no one. It has huge mineral resource. It has its own refineries. It's stationed and positioned so well for the future, and yet it's operating like the most poverty stricken undeveloped nation, that out with its begging bowl. And obviously we know that this is Tinubu's MO. He's got this, he's just the puppet of all puppets. So forget the other African nation. Tinubu right now may very well be, in fact, I would argue that Tinubu is the worst president in Africa right now. And he's just basically doing, he's devolved Africa to the tune of devolved Nigeria to the tune of about 30 to 40 years with the decisions that he's made. He's absolutely horrendous. So it's just really painful to see that this good work that's being done in the Sahel is being reversed in the ECOWAS regions. Obviously, we know nations like Ivory Coast have no choice. They had their democratically elected leader overthrown and replaced. It's just, yeah, it's very, very painful right now, given that I love the ECOWAS so much and it's such a great place to visit right now as well. We are destabilizing ourselves with this allegiance, this inexplicable allegiance that we have to these Western nations.
The jihadists still killed people every single day. So why are you here if the reason why you're here, you're actually not doing the reason why you're here? Why are you here if the jihadists are still killing people every single day? He asked them to leave. Well, he asked Americans to leave too, because American had a special base supposedly to monitor terrorists around Africa. But in the meantime, while you have a base in my country monitoring terrorists, but in my very country, terrorists are still killing people, please get out. Number two, he has built close ties with African countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. When Bazoum was president, the ties were very untying, you know what I mean? It's like brothers don't talking to each other.
I would love to see Mauritania join the alliance. I'd love to see an uprising in Mauritania, similar to one that similar to the one that Tiani done in Niger. I'd love to see that, because Mauritania is being increasingly encroached by those that do not classify themselves as African, let's just say. And I would love to see, I would love to see an empowerment of the indigenous, the African indigenous from the invaded class. So I'd like to see a similar thing happen in Mauritania, and I think it potentially can happen. Let's see. And in the Western Sahara as well. I think the Maghreb regions obviously are too far gone at this stage, but I think Western Sahara and Mauritania certainly could see a reverse of the current the current direction they're heading in.
Each other, you don't care about one another. But as soon as Tiani took power, he looked into his brothers. Look at them, the neighboring countries. They are the same people culturally. Number three, security has improved since Tiani has taken power. From now on, farmers have returned to the field in rural areas where they ran away. They're back. Number four, he has reinforced respect for local people. So even though the man has turned away from France, okay, he's now looking into Russia and China. What he has done is amazing. What? You know, a couple of months ago, there was major big salary gaps, you know, in this one of these companies, a petroleum company run by the Chinese in Niger. Now, the Nigerian hired some people from China who were getting paid $8,000 per month, and local Nigerian were getting paid $1,200 for the very same position, very same qualification. $8,000 for the Chinese national and $1,200 for the Nigerian. So Tiani said, we cannot do this anymore. He fired some of the big people in that company. He fired them, go back to China. He ordered, if you've been working here for 4 years, you must go back to China. We need to hire more locals. That's what he's done for his normal people.
Shout out. And it takes hard leadership like that, hard decisions like that. These are the kind of decisions that the South African government tried to make, and every time they would try and make these decisions, the white South African populace would use the media to kneecap them. And once again, they knew they would always get the overseas support from the EU, from the European nations, from the white nations, because when it comes to their best interest, they do know how to draw ranks. They know how to say, no, we are standing shoulder to shoulder with each other against against any kind of, you know, independence movement that we're seeing amongst, you know, native populations, amongst black populations, Africans, etc. They will always stand and draw ranks against us. That's what they do. And if they don't draw ranks overtly, they'll do it, once again, like I said, in their silence. They'll do it in their silence.
In March 2025, he ordered the 3 top Chinese oil executives to leave the country within 48 hours for mistreating the locals. A lot of African countries don't do that. Okay, we're talking about this Niger. I mean, I understand nobody's perfect, but I want you to understand the context. Now, there was a hotel made by the Chinese, okay, in Niger. You know, Chinese come and build hotels and all that. This hotel was shut down. Why? Because apparently this hotel was doing negative things. What negative things? Well, the reason were very simple. They talked about discriminatory practices, including unjustified denial of access to people of other nationalities. Chinese people in Niger opened a hotel where they only accept Chinese people as guests, no black people, okay?
To be honest with you, there should have already been a blockade on them writing the name of the sign in Chinese. That shouldn't have been allowed. There needs to be laws against that. Now, obviously, the argument being made is the colonial language is French. Am I saying they should bar French? That's probably going to be too difficult to do. It's too early stages, too difficult to do. It's still the lingua franca of the region, and actually it's quite convenient for the Sahel regions to have that ability to communicate with one another in a single language. So I'm not suggesting that Africa is incredibly complex. In any given nation, particularly large nations across the Sahel, ECOWAS regions, you'll have a minimum of 1 or 2 score ethnic groups that make up the populations within any given nation. So I totally understand that problem. But the idea of allowing a foreign, group to come from, Asia, and then to build a huge hotel, and then the sign to be, written in, kanji script is absolutely ridiculous. I'm sorry. Shouldn't be allowed. They wouldn't, they should just say, no, you got to have it in a language that we can understand. Pick one. We've got 30. Pick one of those languages to put your sign in, but it's not going to be in Chinese, or it's not going to be in that script. I'm sorry. That's literally what they should have said.
Number 2, unauthorized expansion of construction without prior notification of the government. I mean, if you go to somebody's country and you're going to build something, a mall or a business, you have a plan, right? With a rural office. You know exactly how many meters you need and whatever you need to do. You can't expand without checking with them. Well, the Chinese did that. Number 3.
I'll say something. Africa, and I'm not speaking for all of Africa, but the nations that I know, because I'm interested in land and development, for obvious reasons. And it is, as long as you buy land, it is very much the Wild West in many African nations, even the really developed ones. When it comes to planning permission, you don't really need planning permission. So you could buy a tiny swath of land and then build like a 50-story building on it and have no planning permission, basically, because you own the land. That's really what they're looking at. And if you live next door to that and you have all of your light blocked out by some massive 50-story building, it's kind of like, well, just deal with it. That's kind of like the African way. Buy a bigger plot of land where the shadow isn't cast directly on your, so it doesn't have the protections that they have in the West. So I would like to see what the agreement was. Like, were they building on their land, or were they overstepping or encroaching someone else's land? Or does Nigeria have more advanced planning policies than other African nations, which could also be possible?
Inaccurate and false reporting of data. Okay, they were not paying tax accordingly. This is what Jiang has done since he's there. Yes, Mohamed Bazoum is in jail. Not in jail, he's in the house with his wife and stuff. They're not releasing him for a very crucial reason, which we talk about next time.
Well, shout out Mohamed Bazoum, whatever his name. He can stay in jail. He can rot in his house or wherever it is for all I care. I have not got no time to feel sorry for him. Especially he poses more of a threat than anything else. And I think naivete has been the bane of many an African uprising, have been ruined by the fact that we are too naive and too trusting. So yeah, I hope he stays there and he rots. That's enough of an update. I hope that was informative. This is an excellent video, by the way. Subscribe to Zach Makwasa if you haven't already. Superb analysis and breakdown there. Really enjoyed and learned a lot from that. So yeah, shout out to him. I think the next video we'll close out with, this is in direct opposition or juxtaposition to what we just watched. This is about Black South Africans say the quiet part out loud, no blacks. This is South Africans who, I'm sorry if you're South African on here, by the way, as well. South Africans are probably my least favorite Africans, black and white, just because the white ones, obviously, I've met too many of them, and maybe I met the ones who have fled. And often it's the people who flee nations who are often the worst. So all of the kind of like the Cubans and the Venezuelans that you'll meet in Miami will be assholes who hate the nation, and all of the South Africans you meet in Britain will also be assholes who hate Africans. So I've unfortunately met scores of white South Africans and never met one that I liked. That's just me being totally honest with you. And I generally get on with white people. White South Africans who have left South Africa tend to be the worst human beings on the planet. They are just disgusting human beings most of the time. Can't hide their racism for very long. The worst. And then you meet black South Africans who unfortunately have had their minds conditioned by their white controlled media, who just hate black people and who hate themselves. I've never met a group of Africans who hate themselves as much as most black South Africans. Now, I'm not saying most as in a majority. I mean, as in the proportion of that nation of black people that hate themselves and defend whiteness is higher than you'll find in any other African nation. So yeah, I'll be honest with you, South Africans are my least favorite people on both sides. I'm not restricted to one side, but let's just watch this and see where we land with this.
South Africans are protesting that the Nigerians leave their country immediately, and all the other illegal immigrants. As you can see in this protest right here, one of those immigrants try to become part of it, and they immediately notice that, hey, you're not one of us, and chase them up out of there. And these are the reasons why they're protesting.
What is the main message as you also mark?
So isn't it, I'm sure many of you straight away can see the irony here. Okay, many of you straight away can see the irony here is that they're out here protesting about immigrants. Like, dude, have you not listened to Malema? Like, respectfully, as a black South African, you are the indigenous and you are the least in your nation. You're treated as third-class citizens. You likely are impoverished, and you're sitting there worrying about black immigrants from Africa, and you're not bothered about the settlers who are essentially running your nation and bleeding it dry. No, that doesn't bother you whatsoever. Okay, cool.
1 year anniversary since this movement started.
The main message is that we're tired of not being prioritized in our own country. We're tired of illegal immigrants, and we're tired of a government that doesn't listen to us. Even across different political parties, we are united in the fact that we want illegal immigrants out of this country, and we continuously keep.
I never heard Africans talk about other Africans as illegal immigrants. I think the only place you'll hear that kind of rhetoric, that kind of like really poisoned rhetoric, is amongst black South Africans. They're the only ones who talk like that, and they're not in the economic position to talk like that, because yes, they'll turn around and say, yes, but our nation's so developed and we've got developed. Yeah, but the developed economy doesn't include you. Okay, that's the problem with black South Africans. They're in the worst position because they're living in a developed economy. They're living, it's still a G8 nation, isn't it? South Africa. They're living in a developed economy. Or was it G6? I can't remember. No, it's a BRICS nation. It's a BRICS nation, isn't it? I can't remember exactly what it is, but they're living in a developed economy. But you're not part of that developed economy. You are external to the benefits and the riches, okay, of that economy. So you turning around and calling black people illegal immigrants, black people from other African nations, is just wild to me. And I wonder if, do they include SADC nations in this? Because you have the Southern African, I can't remember, but that essentially that kind of like conglomerate of states, just like you have ECOWAS and you have the Sahel region. We have in the south, you have the SADC regions. Are they classifying other SADC population, because they're supposed to have free access, the SADC nations, to and from? Are you classifying them as illegals as well in this broad classification? How far does this go? It's bizarre.
Being provoked by them, and our government is not acting. Instead, they want to point at us as the people that need to treat them well. We can't even enjoy the freedom that people die for in our own country because other people have problems in theirs.
So I mean, listen to what she's saying. This is someone who's poisoned by the media. She's saying we can't enjoy the freedoms of our country because of immigrants. She thinks that the poverty in her nation, her lack of enjoyment, is because of black immigrants. Can you imagine that? She thinks it's that they're restricting her. What's wrong, darling? Are you going to the fancy restaurant and all the Nigerians have booked all the seats? Are you going to? What's wrong? Are you going to the cinema and you can't get a seat in the cinema because all of the Zimbabweans and the Botswanans and the Ghanaians have all booked up the cinema, and I can't get a seat in the cinema because all of the African illegal immigrants are. No, what you're talking about is not being able to find employment in your nation, bottom of the rung employment in your nation, which your people should not be restricted to, but are, because you clearly have some massive domestic issues to deal with, your settler class. And your high unemployment rates are not because of the immigrants. Yeah, they're because your nation is set up for black people to fail. This is why people like Mr. Malema exist, and the EFF, who you should be backing, yeah, to correct these economic injustices. This is crazy talk I'm hearing from her.
It's time for them to go and fight for their own country in their own countries.
She checked those fancy words immediately. Isms, phobias, what have that done for me and my people, right? I could care less. You can't shame me into feeling bad. Like, they went through apartheid. They fought their fight. They fought to have all these benefits and rights that they have in South Africa, only for some immigrants, foreigners to come over to their country that had nothing to do with the rights that they fought for, or experience what they went through. And she's like, go back to your country and fight the same way we fought. Like, this is not cool. Like, y'all coming over here to reap the benefits of what we fought, what we sold. Like, how do y'all feel about her comments?
Her comments are uneducated. First of all, coming to the understanding of, and by the way, I'd question about whether or not she's even talking about illegals, because it sounds like she's just got a problem with immigrants, full stop. And a lot of African, a lot of the agreements between African unions, states are about, free movement for Africans from one nation to the next. So even the classification of people being illegal a lot of the time is invalid. Okay. And the problem that she's got has got nothing to do with other Africans. This is the thing. When it came to American history, would be a good parallel for us to kind of like make a comparison to what's going on here. When Americans found their numbers dwindling, they opened the doors to Europeans. Okay, they opened the doors to the Irish, they opened the doors to Italians, they opened the doors to lots of immigration to bolster up the white numbers. They wanted to bolster the white numbers. And so they used immigration as a tool to do that. Okay. If you're trying to, and you don't have the skill base, okay, you don't have the economic prowess to be able to address the imbalances, immigration could actually be very, very beneficial. It could be very, very beneficial to have entrepreneurs from places like Nigeria come over. It could be very, very beneficial to have skilled people from neighboring nations come over and to bolster the numbers and to bolster the political prowess of the African population within South Africa, because they will literally be able to fight on your behalf. Seeing them as the enemy and the reason why you can't get ahead doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. You have an enemy literally in your midst. Everyone is aware of that,
When I told you people that South Africa is not a good place for Nigerians, you thought I was lying. Take a look at this above my head.
Violence has broken out between local residents and foreign nationals in East London, in South Africa's Eastern Cape province. A protest organized by the anti-foreigner group.
I hope all of you had what.
And Black South Africans are very, very quick to enact violence against other Africans. They're very, very quick to do it. It's become very, very tasteful for them to do so, and they'll do it almost as quickly as they'll defend a white South African doing their native, Zulu dance moves. They'll defend them to, oh no, we just want Africa. Oh, we want Africa. when Rainbow Nation, they love talking about Rainbow Nation when it comes to white South Africans, but they will quickly be violent against Nigerians. And by the way, that I've spoken about this before, but the hatred for Nigerians comes from a very, very long line of anti-Nigerian propaganda that has been peddled by the white media, the white-owned South African media, for decades now. They've created movies where they've made Nigerians the criminals. They created movies when they've, like, literally the news, everything is always Nigerians, as much anti-Nigerian propaganda as possible. And unfortunately, the Black South African population have absorbed it, because if there's one thing about Africans, is they love the news. Africans freaking love the news. The continent wide, they watch and buy into the news as though it was their own ancestor who was dictating to them what's been happening around the world. They treat the news like it's a direct line from Yahweh. This is the problem with Africans,
He said, a protest organized by anti-foreigners group. When I said South Africa is not a good place for Nigerians, some of you were crying in the comment section. Now you can see that the country is not even good for foreigners completely. These are countrymen that the white has been pressing their neck for centuries. They can't even enter the white side of South Africa, but when they see a fellow black African, all their eyes go open.
March aimed,
and this is a fact. I've got sad stories of black South Africans even coming over here and randomly starting fights with black people in London. Imagine, like, you got to look for black people in London, you know. You know, you'll be on a train, you know, we'll make up, like, you know, maybe 20% if you're lucky on a busy black day of a train that you're on in London. Yeah, you might see. I'll tell you right now, yeah, black South Africans come over here, they'd be ready to start fight with the black people over here. They really, really hate themselves over here.
at Nigerian national turned chaotic environment.
In case you missed that part, let me say it again. The protest was organized by an anti-foreigners group aimed at Nigerians. Nigerians have become an endangered species in South Africa. If you like, cry, use your face, squeeze ground. The truth is the truth. Again, I am reiterating it here. South Africa is not a good place for a Nigerian.
Hi everyone, welcome to yet another video. Ace Ndagiri here. Today we're going to be talking about the situation that is escalating in South Africa, like South Africa.
There you go. That was a lot, wasn't it? So I mean, good luck to South Africa. I don't know. Obviously, my heart of hearts is always going to be supportive of the Black South African, and I hope that, you know, people like Malema can be successful in the reappropriation of land, in the redistribution of wealth in that nation. I don't think it's too far gone, but I think with each year that passes, it seems like without them having control over their media, it seems like the negative propaganda is really just continuing to do a job in them. Remember, we can go back like 15 years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, when you had the first kind of outbreak of xenophobic attacks in South Africa, and it just seems to be something that's not correcting itself. Now, I know a lot of Nigerians who spend a lot of time in South Africa, so maybe I'm hoping that these are isolated pockets, isolated incidents that aren't as far-reaching as perhaps this article is suggesting. But, you know, I would also say that nothing about my interactions with South Africans is giving me the impression that their learning is going in the right direction. I think the Black population is becoming more and more indoctrinated. I think the white population is becoming more and more emboldened to act in a white supremacist and belligerent way. I think they've had an increasing number of whites only towns being set up. So everything is suggesting that it's a nation that's heading in the wrong direction, and it needs a radical leader to take over. If I'm going to be totally honest with you, probably might not be a bad thing to see a military coup in South Africa. Might not be a bad thing. I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, I think we'll call it a day there. We are 2.5 hours in. I'm incredibly tired. We had some fun watching some of that stuff, but I'm going to call it a day now. Okay. I'm not going to stay on any longer. And I'll catch you guys on the fly. Thank you for joining me. Take care. Peace.